I was about 13 years old, I used to volunteer for this charity called the Battery Hen Welfare Trust, and I believe it's now called the British Hen Welfare Trust. For every 8 weeks or so, I used to go up to this couple's house, John and Monica, and I used to meet with them. And what we would do is we would go to this battery hen farm in Leicestershire, and what we would do is rescue all of the hens which were coming to the end of their laying lives in the battery hen environment. We'd then take those hens back to John and Monica's house, and then members of the public would make a charitable donation for the hens, and they would spend the rest of their lives living happily in their new owner's gardens. And I remember during my time volunteering for the Battery Hen Welfare Trust that I took about 6 of those hens home myself to look after in my own garden. And being the entrepreneurial 13-year-old that I was, I really wanted to sell my eggs to my next door neighbours. But what I quickly became aware of was the huge amount of regulation, red tape and bureaucracy, even with something as simple as selling the eggs from the garden hens to my neighbours. And I realised that you had to follow strict guidelines relating to the washing of eggs, the labelling of eggs, the size classification of eggs. And I became aware of this book that was called Everything I Want to Do is Illegal, which basically says that when you're setting up a new business, there's so many pieces of red tape to overcome that many entrepreneurs would simply just be put off and abandon their cause. What I'm quickly learning with the development of Heart of England Wildlife Park is that although I identify the site and I've got a clear vision for the park in my mind, there are hundreds, if not thousands of pieces of regulation which must be overcome to make my dream a reality. So from the initial ecology assessments and habitat assessments of the wildlife which are already on the site, to an archaeological survey to determine the historical importance of the land, to highways consultancy and traffic modelling and traffic planning. There's so many different things to consider. And that's before you even start drawing enclosure design, thinking about guest safety with obviously captive animals, and things like buildings and animal housing, which would all need to be considered as part of developing the zoo. Now, despite all this regulation, despite being up to my eyes with paperwork and handbooks and council policies, I'm quickly developing an increased vocabulary of all the key specialist terms regarding the regulation. And to be honest, being a bit of a nerd, I'm having quite a lot of fun actually interpreting all of the different regulations which must be overcome. And I'm absolutely determined to get the best possible advice, to work with the consultants, to make sure we interpret the guidelines correctly and we get the best possible attraction up and running. So I think I mentioned in one of the previous videos that in order to accelerate the development of Heart of England Wildlife Park, I need to sell my house to release the equity to be able to make the project a reality. And the only problem I have at the moment is that I can't sell my house. Due to the coronavirus lockdown, obviously estate agents can't come out to the house and take photos, but I have had the house valued this year. I had it valued in February half term, and I therefore have a value which I can work with at the moment. But the economics teacher inside of me is a little bit worried about what's going to happen to house prices. You know, obviously the lockdown is the best thing at this point in time for public health and trying to prevent the rise of COVID. But inevitably, there's been a complete slowdown in the economy. Loads of people are on furlough. Lots of people are going to lose their jobs. So inevitably, that will probably mean a decline in house prices at some point during the remainder of this year. One of the things I've been doing to prepare for selling the house is I've been boxing things up or just listing stuff on eBay, with the intention of shipping those when lockdown is over. Whilst going through some of my stuff, I did find some photos from my childhood, and the common theme in most of my childhood photos is animals. And one of my favourite photos is this one of me and my dad at West Midlands Safari Park. My dad is giving some food to the llamas, which used to be next to the reptile house, and since they've removed this area, they have had Amur leopard and now have lorikeets on this site. But I think, from a young age, I've just been completely fascinated in animals and zoos, and I love visiting zoos and animal attractions all over the country and supporting their conservation work. I also found some pictures of me with Daffy the duck out in the garden when I was a bit younger and slightly heavier. in the classic Aston Villa kit, which was the key theme throughout my fashion in my teens. Another picture of me with face painting of a tiger, just that animal theme keeps running. And another one of me and my brother, I think we're out in Fuerteventura here, with a pair of macaws. One of the things you'll notice is that I don't have any pictures with my mum, because she hates having her picture taken, so she's always the other end of the lens. So even though mum was there in all of these pictures, she never actually gets on camera herself. And I asked her whether she would do a reaction video to me telling her that I was quitting my job and building a zoo. But she doesn't want to be on camera. But she's still there, and she's still making the day very special. So even though I might have become somewhat of an expert at drawing the idealistic zoo map on the back of a scrap piece of paper during my 28 years to date, unfortunately, those aren't going to be good enough to submit to Wyche Haven Council's planning committee for approval in respect to the development of Heart of England Wildlife Park. So what I've needed to do is get an architect on board to draw up some plans for the animal housing, for the additional service buildings we require, and ultimately for our landscape map as well. The landscape map will hopefully give Wyche Haven Council's team a really good idea of what Heart of England Wildlife Park will look like after development has taken place. So even though we can't get out of our own homes and the architect has had to work from pictures and images that I've taken, we do have a pretty good draft of the landscape map available to us today. And hopefully you'll be able to see this. But what you can see is how we're going to use the existing piece of commercial property. We're going to apply to the council for change of use and change it into A1, A3 combined use, allowing us to have a cafe and gift shop up and running, hopefully as soon as possible by Christmas, to bring in revenue, which can then be reinvested into the development of Heart of England Wildlife Park. In addition, the existing site has car parking provision for about 70 car spaces. And even though we're going to be real ambassadors for modal shift and sustainable transport measures to get guests to the park, we will need to have slightly larger car parking facilities. So part of an existing field will be converted into additional car parking spaces. The most significant part of the development at first is going to be the southern element of the site, and we're going to transform that into phase 1, Africa. And our African immersive experience would allow guests to walk through the exhibits displaying endangered zebra, ostrich, meerkats, red river hog, really exciting African species. Guests will be able to meander through the paths, not inside the enclosures, but feeling immersed within them, and also they'll be able to follow the path around the rest of the site, visiting wildflower meadows, picnic benches, playgrounds, and also we're going to plant an orchard with an apiary, so beehives, and in that orchard we're going to conserve rare species of Worcestershire apples to really celebrate the Heart of England's agricultural roots. And then what we're going to do is also plant some area of woodland to create habitat space for native species such as bats and birds and maybe small mammals. And then later on in the development, phase 2 would begin with the construction of a South American themed area with some South American species, some primates, maybe lowland tapir, maybe some capybara as well, to really immerse the guests in the South American rainforest. And in this big area in the centre, at first, will be a nice grassland area where families can enjoy a picnic, but ultimately, over time, we'll design more animal exhibits and immersive experiences to plunge our guests into the existence of Heart of England Wildlife Park. So one of the flagship species we're hoping to have at Heart of England Wildlife Park at opening are zebra. So what I'm going to do is just give you a bit of a close-up of our proposed zebra enclosure. So the whole idea of Heart of England Wildlife Park is that it's a walk-through safari experience. Now I don't believe that guests should be walking through the middle of a zebra enclosure. That'd be too dangerous. But what you can see with the design of our landscape is that people will be able to go through these path areas here, which will bring them really close to the boundary and the fencing for the zebra enclosure. But through effective theming and planting of this sort of area here with bushes and natural hedgerow and artificial rock, what will actually happen is that people will believe that they are immersed in the middle of the African savannah. They'll get a great visual viewpoint of the zebra enclosure, but they really will feel like they're in the heart of Africa. We'll then proceed around the path and around the rest of the enclosure. Some of these areas will actually just be dead space, providing again more of a vista point for the guests, but also creating a little bit of distance between the zebras and the guests. You can also see the different terrains, so there's going to be a mix of sand, hard standing, and also grass for the zebra. Even though zebras look great on grass, it's not particularly good for their hooves. They do need to be kept on a bit of a harder substrate to make sure their hooves wear down and there are no veterinary difficulties which are encountered later on with hoof growth. One of the funniest things with the first draft of the plans which I had was that the architect actually put the path for the ostrich enclosure straight through the middle. I can't see the zoo licensing inspector agreeing that a path for an ostrich enclosure would be a great idea. So even though we have this walk-through safari experience, there definitely needs to be a standoff barrier and a fencing barrier between the guests and the animals, just to ensure everybody's safety. For things like ring-tailed lemurs, of course, the guests can get in and amongst the animals, but with zebras, ostriches, they're too dangerous for people to actually be inside the enclosure. So even though I've worked with the architect to create the landscape plan for Heart of England Wildlife Park, I've recently recruited a zoo consultant who's going to give us insight into all aspects of enclosure design, animal welfare, record keeping, animal transfers, movements. So the next step for me is to discuss our plans with the zoo consultant, get his feedback. And one of the things that I'm really keen to do in this whole process is to do everything right and do everything by the book. So we've had one of the, in my opinion, the best zoo consultants in the country, if not the world. He's previously worked at Twycross Zoo, Chester Zoo, London Zoo, some of the best collection in the United Kingdom. He's also worked overseas in some zoological collections and at universities as well. And his insight in establishing collections from the ground up and also adding to historic and reputable collections is unrivaled. So the next step for us is to have a conversation with him, find out a bit more about what he can offer us, but also get his opinion on all elements of enclosure design so that we can create environments whereby we can maximize animal welfare and ensure that all of the animals on site can access their 5 freedoms and obviously have the best possible enclosure provided. Okay, so basically we can't meet with them before the 30th of July, is that right? Yeah, because I've spoken to a few of the planning team over email, and they've been very warm and receptive of the plans. But obviously, it's really disappointing that we can't meet with them for at least 6 weeks because we're keen to obviously get the project up and running to accelerate its development. But a 6-week time lag at this stage, just to discuss it with your planning team would be disappointing. No, I appreciate. Yeah, I appreciate we're all working from home, but so far everyone's been pretty quick in responding via phone and email. It'd be really good if we have like a Zoom meeting maybe or Microsoft Teams, just to introduce each other but also discuss the pre-planning application. Okay. Well, no, if you're saying that the 30th of July genuinely is the earliest that we can have that conversation, then we'll have to stick with that. But how can we work now to accelerate the process? Do you want us to submit the pre-planning application online? Because we can submit you the architectural plans, we can submit you a proposed zoo licensing document, we can obviously submit you our initial highways, archaeology and ecology work. Yeah, okay. And just to confirm, there'll be 0 fee for our pre-application planning submission because of the fact we're creating so many jobs within the South Worcestershire economy. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, well, I look forward to meeting with your team on the 30th of July. Will you send over the Zoom invite? Yeah, Fantastic. Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, well, if anything does become available early in the 30th of July, please do get in touch and, let us know. And I will move anything in my calendar to obviously speak with you guys. Okay. Well, thanks for your time. I'll speak to you soon. Take care. Stay safe. Bye. So I've had a somewhat strange conversation with Wychavon Council this afternoon, despite them being very forthcoming and helpful over email initially regarding our pre-planning application for the site at Holborough Green. They've now told me that they can't meet with me until the 30th of July over Zoom or Microsoft Teams to discuss our pre-planning application. And obviously that sort of time lag is not going to be very helpful whatsoever. So I've encouraged them to get in contact with me if anything becomes available in their Head of Planning and Leisure's diary so that we can have the meeting earlier. But if that doesn't happen, we're looking at a 6-week time lag before we can move forward. So what we're going to do is submit the pre-planning application anyway, and then hopefully when we meet with the Head of Planning for Wychavon and their team on the 30th of July, they will have more answers for us. But because I was a little bit disappointed with the way that Wychavon Council proposed a date 6 weeks into the future, I actually contacted my local MP, Rachel McLean, and just sent her a friendly letter asking if she would support the development of Heart of England Wildlife Park within her constituency. And then probably half an hour after I sent that email, I got a call from the Deputy Leader of Redditch Borough Council, Mike Rouse. And he said that he hadn't heard of the project as of yet, and he was really excited that it was coming to Redditch. And I quickly realised there had been a misunderstanding. And basically in my email, maybe I didn't make it clear enough that despite the zoo being within Rachel McLean's constituency of Redditch, the site is just slightly outside of Redditch Borough Council's jurisdiction and is overseen by Wychavon. But Mike Rouse was incredibly receptive of the idea. He said it's exactly the sort of thing which the people of Redditch have been demanding for years, and there was a lot of demand from local families and young people, old people, loads of everyone in Redditch basically would be excited about the development. So Mike asked if we'd considered any sites in Redditch as possible alternatives under Redditch Borough Council's jurisdiction, but I was honest with him and said there wasn't anything available that met our needs. All of the sites that are currently on the market in Redditch are just too small. But Mike said he'd put out a word with his council representatives to see if there was any surplus council-owned land. He also said he would, just put feelers out in the community to see if there were any sites available which we could potentially look at. But despite all of that, he was so warmly receptive of the idea and said that he would warmly welcome the project, he would put in a good word at Wychavon Council and say that they'd be fully supportive of the development to hopefully bring more tourism, more economic opportunities to this area of Worcestershire. Hello? Hi Mike, how are you? Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I was just about to head out to Tesco's, but don't worry, I would definitely be very happy to take your call. You found something in Redditch? Fantastic. No, of course, I'll be very happy to hear more. Please do. Hi guys, it's genuinely hilarious to watch back those lockdown clips when we were initially planning the zoo. But it's also so rewarding to see the progress we've made from March, April and May up until now in early September. This week we've launched our online shop for Heart of England Wildlife Park, where you can get your exclusive H&E Wildlife Park zebra, meerkats, lemurs. We're also stocking international brands such as Playmobil and Schlecht. In addition, we're regularly updating our blog with all the latest news, and if you do want to keep up to date with all of the goings on at Heart of England Wildlife Park, make sure you like our Facebook page. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter and TikTok. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe on this YouTube video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.